Hello friends, I am back again to continue our reading of Srimad Bhagavatam. So today we will continue reading the introduction of Srimad Bhagavatam from Srila Prabhupada, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And we are right now reading about the life of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who is considered to be the one who introduced the Sankirtana movement and is an incarnation of the Lord himself. So we had read till the point where he had discussed with Keshava Bharati for taking up sannyas. So continuing from there. After consulting with Keshava Bharati, the Lord left Navadvip for Katwa to formally accept the sannyas order of life. He was accompanied by Srila Nityananda Prabhu, Chandrasekhar Acharya and Mukunda Datta. These three assisted him in the details of the ceremony. The incident of the Lord's accepting the sannyas order is very elaborately described in the Chaitanya Bhagavata by Srila Vrindavan Das Thakura. Thus, at the end of his 24th year, the Lord accepted the sannyas order of life in the month of Magha. After accepting this order, he became a full-fledged preacher of the Bhagavad Dharma. Although he was doing the same preaching work in his householder life, when he experienced some obstacles to his preaching, he sacrificed even the comfort of his home life for the sake of the fallen souls. In his householder life, his chief assistants were Srila Advaita Prabhu and Srila Srivas Thakura, but after he accepted the sannyas order, his chief assistants became Srila Nityananda Prabhu, who was deputed to preach specifically in Bengal, and the six Goswamis, Rupa Goswami, Sanatana Goswami, Jiva Goswami, Gopal Bhatta Goswami, Raghunath Dasa Goswami, and Raghunath Bhatta Goswami, headed by Srila Rupa and Sanatana, who were deputed to go to Vrindavana to excavate the present places of pilgrimage. The present city of Vrindavan and the importance of Rajabhumi were thus disclosed by the will of Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. The Lord, after accepting the sannyas order, at once wanted to start for Vrindavana. For 3 continuous days he travelled in the Radha Desha, places where the Ganges does not flow. He was in full ecstasy over the idea of going to Vrindavana. However, Srila Nityananda diverted his path and brought him instead to the house of Advaita Prabhu in Shantipura. The Lord stayed at Sri Advaita Prabhu's house for a few days, and knowing well that the Lord was leaving his earth and home for good, Sri Advaita Prabhu sent his men to Navadvip to bring Mother Sachi to have a last meeting with her son. Some unscrupulous people say that Lord Chaitanya met his wife also after taking sannyas and offered her his wooden slipper for worship, but the authentic sources give no information about such a meeting. His mother met him at the house of Advaita Prabhu, and when she saw her son in sannyas, she lamented. By way of compromise, she requested her son to make his headquarters in Puri so that she would easily be able to get information about him. The Lord granted this last desire of his beloved mother. After this incident, the Lord started for Puri, leaving all the residents of Navadvip in an ocean of lamentation over his separation. The Lord visited many important places on the way to Puri. He visited the temple of Gopinath Ji, who had stolen condensed milk for his devotee Srila Madhavendra Puri. Since then, deity Gopinath Ji is well known as Krishna Chora Gopinath. Akshira Chora Gopinath. The Lord relished this story with great pleasure. The propensity of stealing is there even in the absolute consciousness, but because this propensity is exhibited by the absolute, it loses its perverted nature and thus becomes worshipable even by Lord Chaitanya on the basis of the absolute consideration that the Lord and his stealing propensity are one and identical. This interesting story of Gopinath Ji is vividly explained in the Chaitanya Charitamrita by Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami. After visiting the temple of Kshira Chora Gopinath, of Remuna at Balasore in Orissa, the Lord proceeded towards Puri. On the way visited the temple of Sakshi Gopala, who appeared as a witness in the matter of two Brahmana devotees' family quarrel. The Lord heard the story of Sakshi Gopal with great pleasure because he wanted to impress upon the atheists that the worshipable deities in the temples approved by the great acharyas are not idols as alleged by men with a poor fund of knowledge. The deity in the temple is the Archa incarnation of the personality of Godhead, and thus the deity is identical with the Lord in all respects. He responds to the proportion of the devotee's affection for him. In the story of Sakshi Gopal, in which there was a family misunderstanding by two devotees of the Lord, in order to mitigate the turmoil as well as to show specific favor to his servitors, travelled from Vrindavan to Vidyanagara, a village in Orissa, in the form of his Archa incarnation. From there, the deity was brought to Cuttack, and thus the temple of Sakshi Gopal is even today visited by thousands of pilgrims on the way to Jagannath Puri. The Lord stayed overnight there and began to proceed towards Puri. On the way, his sannyasa rod was broken by Nityanand Prabhu. The Lord became apparently angry with him about this and went alone to Puri, leaving his companions behind. At Puri, when he entered the temple of Jagannath, he became at once saturated with transcendental ecstasy and fell down on the floor of the temple unconscious. The custodians of the temple could not understand the transcendental feats of the Lord, but there was a great learned Pandita named Sarvabhaum Bhattacharya who was present, and he could understand that the Lord's losing his consciousness upon entering the Jagannath temple was not an ordinary thing. Sarvabhaum Bhattacharya, who was the chief appointed Pandita in the court of the king of Orissa, Maharaj Prataparudra, was attracted by the youthful luster of Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and could understand that such a transcendental trance was only rarely exhibited, and only then by the topmost devotees who are already on the transcendental plane in complete forgetfulness of material existence. Only a liberated soul could show such a transcendental feat, and the Bhattacharya, who was vastly learned, could understand this in the light of the transcendental literature with which he was familiar. He therefore asked the custodians of the temple not to disturb the unknown sannyasi. He asked them to take the Lord to his home so he could be further observed in his unconscious state. The Lord was at once carried to the home of Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, who at that time had sufficient power of authority due to his being the Sabha Pandit or the state dean of faculty in Sanskrit literatures. The learned Pandita wanted to scrutinizingly test the transcendental feats of Lord Chaitanya, because often unscrupulous devotees imitate physical feats in order to flaunt transcendental achievements just to attract innocent people and take advantage of them. A learned scholar like the Bhattacharya can detect such impostors, and when he finds them out, he at once rejects them. In the case of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the Bhattacharya tested all the symptoms in the light of the Shastras. He tested as a scientist, not as a foolish sentimentalist. He observed the movement of the stomach, the beating of the heart, and the breathing of the nostrils. He also felt the pulse of the Lord and saw that all his bodily activities were in complete suspension. When he put a small cotton swab before the nostrils, he found that there was a slight breathing as the fine fibers of cotton moved slightly. Thus he came to know that the Lord's unconscious trance was genuine, and he began to treat him in the prescribed fashion. But Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu could only be treated in a special way. He would respond only to the resounding of the holy names of the Lord by his devotees. This special treatment was unknown to Sarvabhaum Bhattacharya because the Lord was still unknown to him. When the Bhattacharya saw him for the first time in the temple, he simply took him to be one of many pilgrims. In the meantime, the companions of the Lord who reached the temple a little after him heard of the Lord's transcendental feats and of his being carried away by the Bhattacharya. The pilgrims at the temple were still gossiping about the incident, but by chance, one of these pilgrims had met Gopinath Acharya, who was known to Gadadhar Pandit, and from him it was learned that the Lord was lying in an unconscious state at the residence of Sarvabhaum Bhattacharya, who happened to be the brother-in-law of Gopinath Acharya. All the members of the party were introduced by Gadadhar Pandit to Gopinath Acharya, who took them all to the house of Bhattacharya, where the Lord was lying unconscious in a spiritual trance. All the members then chanted loudly and holy name of the Lord Hari as usual, and the Lord regained his consciousness. After this, Bhattacharya received all the members of the party, including Lord Nityananda Prabhu, and asked them to become his guests of honor. The party, including the Lord, went for a bath in the sea, and the Bhattacharya arranged for their residence and meals at the house of Kashi Mishra. Gopinath Acharya, his brother-in-law, also assisted. There were some friendly talks about the Lord's divinity between the two brothers-in-law, and in this argument, Gopinath Acharya, who knew the Lord before, now tried to establish the Lord as the personality of Godhead, and the Bhattacharya tried to establish him as one of the great devotees. Both of them argued from the angle of vision of authentic Shastras and not on the strength of sentimental wax popular. The incarnations of God are determined by authentic Shastras and not by popular votes of foolish fanatics. Because Lord Chaitanya was an incarnation of God in fact, foolish fanatics have proclaimed so many so-called incarnations of God in this age without referring to authentic scriptures. But Sarvabhaum Bhattacharya or Gopinath Acharya did not indulge in such foolish sentimentalism. On the contrary, both of them tried to establish or reject his divinity on the strength of authentic Shastras. Later, it was disclosed that Bhattacharya also came from the Navadvip area, and it was understood from him that Neelambara Chakravarti, the maternal grandfather of Lord Chaitanya, happened to be a class fellow of the father of Sarvabhaum Bhattacharya. In that sense, the young sannyasi Lord Chaitanya evoked paternal affection from Bhattacharya. Bhattacharya was the professor of many sannyasis in the order of the Shankaracharya Sampradaya, and himself also belonged to that cult. As such, the Bhattacharya desired that the young sannyasi Lord Chaitanya also hear from him about the teachings of Vedanta. Those who are followers of the Shankara cult are generally known as Vedantists. This does not, however, mean that Vedanta is a monopoly study of the Shankara Sampradaya. Vedanta is studied by all the bona fide Sampradayas, but they have their own interpretations. But those in the Shankara Sampradaya are generally known to be ignorant of the knowledge of the Vedantist Vaishnavas. For this reason, the Bhakti Vedanta title was first offered to the author by the Vaishnavas. The Lord agreed to take lessons from Bhattacharya on the Vedanta, and they sat together in the temple of Lord Jagannath. The Bhattacharya went on speaking continuously for 7 days, and the Lord heard him with all attention and did not interrupt. The Lord's silence raised some doubts in Bhattacharya's heart, and he asked the Lord how it was that he did not ask anything or comment on his explanations of Vedanta. The Lord posed himself before the Bhattacharya as a foolish student and pretended that he heard the Vedanta from him because the Bhattacharya felt that this was the duty of a sannyasi. But the Lord did not agree with his lectures. By this, the Lord indicated that the so-called Vedantists among the Sankara Sampradaya or any other Sampradaya who do not follow the instructions of Srila Vyasadeva are mechanical students of the Vedanta. They are not fully aware of the great knowledge. The explanation of the Vedanta Sutra is given by the author himself in the text of Srimad Bhagavatam. One who has no knowledge of the Bhagavatam will hardly be able to know what the Vedanta says. The Bhattacharya, being a vastly learned man, could follow the Lord's sarcastic remarks on the popular Vedantist. He therefore asked him why he did not ask about any point which he could not follow. The Bhattacharya could understand the purpose of his dead silence for the days he heard him. This showed clearly that the Lord had something else in mind. Thus the Bhattacharya requested him to disclose his mind. Upon this the Lord spoke as follows: My dear sir, I can understand the meaning of the sutras like Janmadi Asya Yataha Shastra Yonitvat and Athato Brahma Jigyasa of the Vedanta Sutra. But when you explain them in your way, it becomes difficult for me to follow them. The purpose of the sutras is already explained in them, but your explanations are covering them with something else. You do not purposely take the direct meaning of the sutras, but indirectly give your own interpretations. So we will end our reading today with this. Wishing you all a great day. Happy listening. Please go to the YouTube site and subscribe so that you don't miss out on any of the readings. Bye bye.